Today, lawmakers on the House Intelligence Committee, they're going to begin their review of a report on impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Once lawmakers vote to adopt that report, it's going to be kicked over to the House Judiciary Committee.
The Judiciary Committee is already scheduled to hear from legal experts. That will happen on Wednesday. They'll provide their assessment of the president's actions in the Ukraine matter. The White House has reportedly already opted not to participate in this week's hearing, but have not ruled out future involvement. Joining us now with what we can expect next in this phase of the inquiry is Senior Correspondent for The Hill, Mike Lillis. Great to see you, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, lay out the week for us and a little timeline of where we're headed here.
Right. Well, you know, Democrats are moving at warp speed as they have since this thing began. And so now we see phase 3, the next phase. It moves from the Intelligence Committee to the Judiciary Committee. But before that happens, the Intel Committee still has to produce this report. They've had these closed-door depositions. They've had the public hearings, 17 witnesses. And now they've worked over Thanksgiving to put together this report. Today, at 6 o'clock this evening, the Intel members of both parties will have access to that in a closed-door setting, and then they will have a hearing tomorrow to vote on the final product.
When will the public see that report?
That's a good question. After the vote, it'll transfer over to the Judiciary Committee. We assume that it will become public then, but that's going to be up to Adam Schiff and Gerald Nadler.
So how long is this going to take in the Judiciary Committee? What's the process here? How many witnesses are being called? And ultimately, what are they trying to determine? Are they trying to determine this from a judicial perspective, how the president might have broken the law, or is it based on the report? I think a lot of people are very confused.
Right. No, it's a good question.
Yeah.
And the way they're breaking it down is the Intelligence Committee said all along, we are not considering articles of impeachment. This is the investigative stage. We want to hear from these witnesses to determine what happened. What happened in Ukraine? What happened in Washington? What was Giuliani up to? What was Donald Trump up to? They think that they have enough evidence, even without getting a lot of these, the prominent White House guys, the Mick Mulvaney's and the John Boltons. They said we can't wait for the courts for these guys to come testify. So we have all these diplomats, these national security figures. These are the people who were on the ground. We've got the evidence. Now it's up to the Judiciary Committee to decide if that evidence constitutes impeachment. And so this week is what you're going to see on Wednesday morning is they're going to bring in constitutional scholars, legal scholars, four of them, and they haven't named them just yet. The Democrats get to pick 3, Republicans get to pick 1, and they'll take a look at this report. Here's the evidence. Is it impeachable based on the Founding Fathers, based on the historical precedent that was set in Nixon and Clinton?
What's the process after that? So what happens after? So then they report something out to the floor? Do they have to declare the articles of impeachment? How does that work?
Judiciary Committee has jurisdiction over the articles of impeachment. Gerald Nadler will be charged with crafting them if they decide that that is the case, and it's looking more and more like that is going to be inevitable. So how many are they going to do? What will they be? These are all questions that we don't know. And Wednesday's hearing is the only publicly announced hearing that we've got, although we do hear that Adam Schiff will come, or a member of his staff or members of his staff will come and testify before Judiciary to kind of explain the report and how they reached their conclusions and their recommendations, sort of like Kenneth Starr did in 1998, which is exactly what the Republicans are calling for. If you saw the Sunday shows yesterday, Doug Collins, the senior Republican on the Judiciary Committee, was saying, we want Adam Schiff to testify, and they might get him. But they haven't announced that just yet. And so we don't know how many hearings will happen after that before they move to the drafting of articles phase. But again, they're moving very quickly, and they don't have a a lot of time, and a lot of Democrats want to
Shifty Schiff.
Shifty Schiff. But so many Democrats want this to happen before Christmas, and that ain't far away.
Well, speaking of that, and of course part of the rush here is that you have, after this phase, then it goes to the Senate for the trial. You have any number of Senate Democrats who are running for president, including 2 of the frontrunners, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. But Amy Klobuchar was on the Sunday shows yesterday weighing in on this whole process. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
The first obligation is a constitutional one. We don't have a choice. This is something where the founding fathers themselves, James Madison, said that the reason we needed impeachment provisions is that he feared that a president would betray the trust of the American people to a foreign power. That's why this is proceeding. I see it simply as a global Watergate. Back then, you had a president in Richard Nixon who was paranoid, and he delegated to some people to go break into the headquarters and get into a file cabinet to get dirt on a political opponent. That's basically what this president has done on a global basis. Yes, it's a public trial, and the public will be able to see more and will be able to reach their own decisions. But in the end, it's our constitutional obligation, and I can do 2 things at once.
She says that, but the
don't.
reality is when you're stuck in D.C. for however long
6
and the
days a
media
week.
is covering this wall to wall, all you're going to be hearing about is global Watergate or whatever else spin they want to put on it.
Yeah.
That's right. No, it's certainly a factor in all of this. And of course, Mitch McConnell agrees with her. You know, he's not saying that there's not going to be a trial. He's saying that the Constitution is very clear. We have to hold it. We will hold it. He hasn't said how long that's going to take. He said we'll let the facts.
Richard Burr said
dictate.
6 to 8 weeks, though.
We had heard that, and
Yeah.
I was talking to some Senate Democrats just before the break, and they said right after he said that publicly, he went into a Senate lunch and told Republicans, "I was just making that up." That he was sort
Smart.
of he was sort of basing it on the Clinton. The trial
Clinton
was
took,
about
what, 6 weeks,
I was
5
thinking
weeks?
5.5,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
So he was looking at that and kind of
Frankly,
guessing.
the Clinton one is a lot less complicated than this one. So, you know, from that point of
true.
view. I mean, that here's the thing, Mike. What is it? It's December, what's today's date? December 2nd? So we've got, 18 days? How many actual legislative days? Maybe 15? So in that time, what do they have to do? They have to do this impeachment. They have to pass the USMCA, and they have to fund the U.S. government, which runs out of funding on December 20th. Realistically, how do you think this is all? Do you actually think you're going to hit that Christmas deadline?
We are cautiously
Yeah.
optimistic. To borrow a term that's
Yeah,
often thrown around on Capitol
Yes.
Hill. Last year we didn't think it was going to shut down, and it did. So predicting what's going to happen on Capitol Hill is a dangerous sport, and nobody knows what's going to happen. If Trump is impeached, he is impulsive. Will he not sign the omnibus as a result? We just don't know the answer to that question. Certainly Mitch McConnell wants to get it off his plate and move on to other things. So he's going to be pressuring the White House to sign this omnibus. The appropriators can work it out. They will have a bill to the White House by the 20th, by all indications. There aren't the sticking points that we have seen in past years this year. So in terms of the policy, the funding, the provisions, there's no real huge sticking point. And so, yes, I think it'll get to the president's desk. Will he sign it if he is impeached, 24 hours before? We don't know the answer to that question. You mentioned the USMCA, and that is not must pass. I mean, that is something that everybody wants to do, but if it doesn't get done, nothing happens, right? I mean, it just...
There's a cutoff for it.
There's no cutoff. And one thing that Congress needs is usually a deadline. And if they can punt it into next year, they might punt it into next year. And, Pelosi has said all along that they're not going to sign on to anything that doesn't have the enforceability standards that she and her liberal caucus are after. So they're clearly not there yet. And whether they get there in 3 weeks, we just don't know.
Yeah, and a number of unions have come out against it, which doesn't help the president's case here.
All right.
Mike, great to have your insights.
Thanks, Mike.
so much. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Next on Rising, President Obama left office with high approval ratings.
But in the years since, his favorability among some members of the left has declined. Writer David Dayan explains how Obama lost the activists who got him into office in the first place. That when Rising continues.